Here, because I had to go back down there this weekend.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Advanced Refrigeration Podcast. We're here, the host Brett Wetzel and Kevin Compass. Yeah, what were you doing this week, man?
Well, still dealing with the aftermath of last week and the never-ending startup that never got started because there's no power to the building.
I was gonna say you look kind of haggard, man. I know last week we kind of took a break. We put out the second episode of the CC200 stuff, but you're like I talked to you and you sounded dead on the phone.
Oh yeah, we were working 16s trying to get everything caught up, and I have never been a part of a bigger show. Other contractors, like I have never seen so many wires crisscrossed and like EMS is pulled in such a way that like I just wanted to cut it out and redo it all. And then the high voltage wires all had like question marks all over them. And yeah, it was bad.
So
And
when I talked to you last, you said there was it 18 that were either shorted or something.
36.
36.
In total. There was 36 EMS cables because what they did is they pulled all the cables and they went under 5 bar joists in the store randomly, with like 15 cables here, 30 cables there, 20 cables here, 50 cables here. So they had to pull back this whole bundle in the rack room of like 250 cables that they pulled through in the way possible. And when they brought it in there, they had to pull it all back. Well, it was all tangled, wrapped up, tangled. Nothing was bundled together. So by the time that they got done with that, it took them like 2.5 days, and they were just yanking on it.
So that's what messed it all up. So they had kinks and stuff, and instead of just going up there and straightening it out, they're just pulling as hard as they can, and just not giving it.
Yeah, so that was dealing with that and trying to figure that out. And then they had some elaborate numbering system. So they took, instead of like labeling what the print says, like A1A, A2A, it was like wire number 91 equals A1A. And then you got to look at the manufacturer like pop diagram. And then it's like, that is this. And then the EMS was actually programmed wrong and it was 2 off for everything. So it was really a fourth one. So it was like, just like, I'm trimming this out, and my dyslexic self is just having a meltdown. Yeah, I still have to clean up the panel. It looks horrendous because they took a 3-inch tube and just blew it in the top, and it's like, I don't know how I'm gonna make this look good. I think we're past that point. And
So
then every rack was flat when it showed up.
what?
Oh yeah, they're all every rack just leaks all over the place. 2 of the racks had unburned stubs. Like they weren't the suction stubs for the ball valves were just like tacked in and like halfway burned on one side.
Well, if the valve's closed, you don't need it, right?
It was on the header.
I'm joking.
Yeah. So like deal with that, find that. So I'm ripping Armaflex off brand new racks. They just got power like an hour and a half ago.
So I have a question for you. So I like when because I did my own wire pulling, right? So I remember having my daughter draw on the prints, right? And so like I had her color code. So anything was an EPR, she colored it blue. Anything that was a defrost termination sensor, orange. And then so what I did was bundled whatever wires that I had to pull and marked every single one with a piece of tape on the box that I was pulling with the color oriented with it, with the circuit that I was pulling. And then that way, when I come to the very end, then I knew exactly which one was what. And then I have it labeled right there. And then there was no confusion whatsoever. I don't know what, I mean, I know you use your little labeler, but you're not going to do that when you're pulling because for God fear that it's going to pull apart when you're yanking it through.
I use it when I'm labeling. I use the labeler when I'm pulling. Like I label them back like 4 inches, 5 inches back from where I'm pulling it. But like the Brady labels, especially the ones with the wire wrap around or the tape wrap around it, like I've never had one come back.
Oh, okay. Well, because I know you always typically have to trim out, right? So I didn't know how far you leave. Not that you leave 20 or 30 feet.
Like this time it was 300 feet. Yeah, I'm still salty about that. Like untangling 300, and you saw that bundle like that I sent you.
I
It
did.
was all in this giant rat's nest at the end. It's like they just like tangled it all up and were like, "Yeah, sorry, but here you go." It was not fun.
They were playing jump rope with it at the end. That's what they were doing.
It was rough, but like we got through it. We got it way farther than everybody other contractor in the building by the end of the week, and then they're starting to start up the racks this week, and I'm working a weekend for them.
Gotcha.
And this week here, just we're getting ready to change condensers, and
Again?
yeah, it's just like
Ah,
never ending. It's like every other week. It's just like an entire store of condensers. Except this time, I kind of knocked myself out this morning when I was there.
yeah, tell me about that. You said you knocked yourself out, and I was kind of confused.
Oh, I just sport 1717, the big honking 2 1/8 valve. Well, this old rack, it was like never like angled, like how they kind of angle those ones on the side so it isn't sticking out a foot and a half. I went to go lean up and I drilled my head. And then next thing I'm like, oh, I don't remember being on the floor.
I've only done that once. I was down in Connecticut. It was the oldest convenience store in Connecticut. And like, so all the doorways were only like 5.5 foot tall. And so all the metal joists were like every so often you'd walk under, walk under, walk under. And I forgot that the hallway for the door was probably the same size. And I hit so hard. It was a room full of self-contains that were downstairs, and it was just loud in there. And the people in the room, the office right next to me, heard me hit so hard, and I just landed. And like I've never seen stars before. That messed me up. Oh man.
Oh yeah, I hit it and I just felt like the blood going down my face. I'm like, come on. But it's like it wasn't bad though. It was like you know how it is. Like you barely nick your head and it's just like gushing.
Head wounds bleed, man. I not when I knocked out my teeth, man. Like it looked like I murdered somebody. Like blood just profusely, just all over the place.
So
I'm at home this week again. I took a break from the other traveling that I was doing, and I went camping this weekend with the kid. So that was cool. Although they took us for a real long hike and ended up going 3.5 miles. So people with 1.5 foot long legs weren't really digging it at that point. And my son looks at me. He's like, "Dad, carry me." I was like, "Dude, I got your water, your jacket, and your snack. Your legs are not broken. They still work. You can walk, sir." Okay. So, but tonight we're going to talk about like truck stock. And someone had messaged me and asked me, he's like, I really kind of want to know what you guys would stock on your truck. And it's a hard thing to do because I guess it's really dependent on really what you work on. So we're gonna go through some stuff. I mean, depending on like what you're doing, right? It's like I said, it's going to be dependent, and then also some tricks to make sure you keep that truck stocked with what you have, so you don't forget it. You're like, oh shit, I had one on there, my truck, and now I used it. So, like I said, it really depends on what you're doing. I'll start off if you don't mind. So, one of the things that like I would do like a lot of leaks, right? So I make sure I have leaking parts. So that's going to be dependent on what customer you have, right? You can have a customer like an older customer that has a little bit of CDS and a little bit of EPRs and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So you kind of have to see what common things you're using, right? It could be a rebuild kit for a sport valve, could be a rebuild kit for A8 valve. It could be, I would definitely recommend liquid line solenoid rebuild kits as well as the manual stems. The manual stems, after a while, especially after a gas change, they leak. So a lot of people they'll put some blue schnout on there, and that's bad. It's very easy just to replace those out. Multi motors, trying to get it's getting a little bit harder because you have all of the digital motors. I saw someone the some of the Hill Phoenix stuff has the MPATS motors, and I saw some other manufacturer. And I looked it up for somebody trying to figure out how to reprogram it. Did you see that? It was on the Supermarket Tech Talk site.
yeah. Yeah, I've seen those. Not a big fan of those motors.
Well, yeah, well, because they're not waterproof.
They're not waterproof and you can't really get them at a supply house.
Yeah. And a lot of times you have to have the specific motors that are in there. Like I told you, we had a guy called me about an evaporator that was just pumping so much air through. Like it was spec it was an OWIZ case. It was spec for like 180 FPM, and they couldn't figure out why the suction pressure was so high. So it was one of the side cases, 5/8 line, and he had like a 10-pound pressure drop from that to the other cases. I'm like, well, that's weird. The only thing that would cause that is extra liquid feeding in there for some reason, or the SDR valve that they were acting like as a EPR being messed up, but they changed it out and they overrid it with the SMA. It still wasn't working right. Come to find out, someone replaced the fans, and you could see that the air was running all the way up to 360 FPM, essentially boiling off double the amount of liquid that it was intended for, but the pipe wasn't intended for it. So that's what caused the actual pressure drop on the thing. Just
Yeah,
had too high
it's
of a fan.
it's just stuff like that you can't get at a supply house. Like, no thanks. Like,
Yeah. Also, any kind of a BQ rebuild kit is my go-to. What do you prefer? You prefer the regular Q body or the balance port, Kevin?
balance port. I don't see any reason to even keep the Q body kit. Like, I keep some cartridges, but like if I'm changing a valve, this is getting a balance port, so I only carry the balance port ones. I mean, they cover so much more for what it is. I mean, yeah, I keep Q cartridges just in case I need to upsize one or downsize one, but I will keep a balance port. Obviously, we don't need the whole kit because I mean, most of the time we aren't doing any flare valves. So I usually just keep SBQE bodies. I mean, that's generally what I'm using is SBQE bodies, which are right angled, 3/8 by half, equalized, externally equalized with a screen. I mean, I don't want a valve without a screen. So that's generally what I keep. A couple, maybe like one or two on the truck, and then I keep a ton of cartridges, like probably five of each cartridge, and then two of each power head.
So I have a question because like occasionally you will come across a not self-contained, like a split system. Do you carry any ZP power heads? No.
No, I mean, if I need it, I'll just figure it out later, but it'll get a Z or a C charge.
All right. Now, if you guys don't know what we're talking about, so the C charge is commercial charge. That's the one we typically use for just about everything, mostly on medium temp and some of the OWIZ stuff. Because I think
Husband doors all are coming out with C charges now.
real that's right. You told me that a couple months ago or something. I forgot about that. But yeah, so commercial charge, and then you got the Z for the low temp. Unless even if you're working at one of those biomed type places where they have a single unit, they're still using Z charge. They're not even going into the X charge, even though the saturated is very, very close to where it is. They're still using the Z. But the ZP is a pressure limiting power head. It's a poor man's crankcase pressure regulator. It's good. Like if you have a case that once it comes out of defrost, the load is so big on the case that the compressor starts going above the RLA, not above the running load amps. You can limit that with the pressure limiting power head. I mean, they can't adjust the pressure, but I mean, if you start pulling it down, you see, oh, okay, once it hits about 40-45 pounds, it starts not holding back. Then you could use like a ZP40, right? And then that'll limit the pressure where it won't let it fully open up and start regulating superheat until the suction pressure gets down below that. So if there was some instances that you would do that. What other regular mechanical rebuild type stuff do you want? Gasket book, definitely a gasket book. Anything else? You think?
Gasket book. The other thing is they keep in they spoiling rebuild kits. So I have an entire kit of like solenoid rebuild kits. So all your solenoid sizes through 3/8 all the way up to I usually don't carry like ME30. I'll carry an ME35, the ones with the rubber gaskets that
Mhm.
we had issues with. I usually just carry a gasket. I carry all the way like 7/8 and down.
Yeah, up,
So
up to like a 25, right? Like a 25 port.
at 25, I usually don't even carry either because I mean, I see so few ME25s. Like,
Okay.
it's not a very common valve for what we're doing. So ME19s and down, usually I have a rebuild kit for them. I'll make sure I have all those. I'll stock a uh, sport rebuild kits and port rebuild kits. So A8s, So I'll have complete gasket kits for those. I'll have diaphragm kits. I'll have everything I need, the solenoid kit for them. I'll keep all those in there because I mean, a lot of times you pop them apart, change the gasket, clean them up, they're good to go. So I'll keep those rebuild kits on handy. And then I always save every compressor I do. I save every single gasket out of the dang thing I can get, except for the head ones. I mean, usually those ones are kind of compressor specific, but like I'll keep every unloader gasket, every gasket, and I stash them in a pack out full of like Copeland. And I have one for Bitzer and one for Carlisle, and I have every gasket that you could think of in there.
So they do have some normally open valves. One of the only normally open valves that I typically carry, or I did carry, are like the OE 25s and the OE 35s, because those are pretty common as far as like some of a split valve. So I like having those in case you do have a leak, because unless you're running seasonal and it happens to be that one, I mean it's kind of a pain if that thing is just pissing refrigerant out of it. You know what I mean? So having that would actually definitely help you. Check valves, I carry probably one of each, probably from 3/8 up. How about you?
I'll have mega checks in there, 3/8, half inch, maybe a 5/8. I don't really carry anything more than that. I mean, that's kind of a major repair item. If I need to change a inch and an eighth check valve in the middle of the night, I mean, it is what it is. It's getting hard piped probably. I mean, I don't know. Like I don't have enough room for that. So like I'll keep 3/8 ones, 5/8 ones, stuff like that. I generally don't carry rebuild kits, just mega checks.
Gotcha. Any kind of other mechanical parts you can think about before we go to electrical?
So other than that, like OCVs, like I'll carry an OCV 30 on
Good
my
one.
truck. I usually don't carry anything else. I'll just carry a 30. So I'll keep the OCV 30 on there.
Float, oil float, carry an oil float.
I used to when I ran service a lot more. I
Mm.
used to keep an oil float. I don't right now. I mean, maybe there's one in my truck. I couldn't find it if it was in there. So like, yeah, I have an oil float. You generally, and then generally OL 60HX Sporlan float.
Mm.
So
Gotcha.
a general compressor float. I'll keep one of those, and then like an OMC or usually it's an OMB, but like I'll keep an OMB in there, so that way I have that, and then I'll keep man trying to think what else mechanically. So floats, man. A time clock. I'll keep a general time clock. I used to not, but then we did a lot of Aldi work, so they still had some single unit stores. So I'll keep like a dual voltage time clock.
Like the GM40 or something like that, where you can switch the volt, or now at this point that you don't even have to switch the voltage. You just hook up whatever and it takes off.
That one catches on fire all the time.
All right, well maybe not that one.
I use those digital Paragon ones.
Gotcha.
Like those ones seem to like last a little while longer. And then I'll keep some. We went over oil floats. We went over OCVs. That's pretty much it for mechanical stuff. Oh, I do have some EPRs, but I mean that's more construction stuff. Like I'll keep some CDS valves. Like I have a CDS 7 and a CDS 9 on my truck, which seem to be take care of most of it.
Yeah, that's a real common one. Or the same thing with having the, oh, I'm losing it now. CDS. SER double A, and SER A. I keep those. I used to keep those expansion valves on my truck all the time because a lot of them overcycle because of improper tuning. So they're likely to go bad if they're not tuned, where they're overcycling a whole bunch.
Yeah, I keep a B and an A at the house, but I mean, but I mean, I don't run a ton of service, and usually
Yeah.
when I'm doing startups, and I know that, like, if I'm going to do a CO2 store, I'll go throw them. I'll throw them in the pack outs, and because I know they're probably going to get used.
Oh, since we're talking mechanical, something we forgot, the pulse width rebuild kits for the Danfoss and the Sporlan.
Never
Making
had
sure you what?
mm-mm. I've never had one fail.
Never had a well, never even all right, well, it's okay. All right. Here's the thing. You're doing the startup, right? So you're making sure the system is utterly clean. You're making sure everything's rolling through.
I
My
mean,
point is if you're
still
doing
gets
service,
But even service, like I service the stuff too. Yeah, I mean, I'm usually servicing it till we're out of warranty. Like,
Well, I'm not saying about going bad. I mean, like when the filter, when the screen that's inside those expansion valves clog up, right?
oh, I just clean them, and I've never had one leak after cleaning it.
See, I've heard mixed reviews. I've heard Jimmy will tell you if he recommends replacing the rubber because it kind of like blows up a little bit.
It does pop, but what I've been doing is I stick the O-ring in my pocket right away, and
Oh,
then let it warm up. Because what happens is the CO2 gets in the rubber,
mm,
and then I just coat it with nylog, and it's usually fine.
well, it I would still recommend probably having at least one because if God forbid you were to stick in your pocket, warm it up, and you go to throw it in there, and then all of a sudden, no, we're leaking. Now you're going to be hating life for a minute.
I mean, it's not my case. It's just getting valved off.
Jesus.
I mean, it's the truth.
Oh,
It is what it is. Like at that point,
it's about being prepared. That's what we're doing this for. It's about being prepared for what you're working on.
I mean, you can only prepare for so much.
I had a shit ton of stock, so I prepared for a bunch.
Car, so
What was that?
I drive a clown car.
Yeah, no, I do.
No, I have a small van.
What?
Yeah, I have a 1500,
Mm,
a short wheelbase.
that is kind of tiny.
Yeah,
That's why the transmission's in it. You probably have 2,500 worth of tools
well,
and parts in there.
it's on the bumps. It's on the bump stocks in the back. Like it literally has no spring travel at all in the back.
Overstocked, just a hair.
Mm,
Horrible.
let's go to mechanical. So like
Let's
mechanic
go.
or electrical. So electrical stuff. Like guys, I carry a lot of like random universal stuff. I mean, just using it on startups like relays. So like I carry 24-volt, 120, 208-volt ice cube relays. So I usually have 6 and 8 pin. So single pole, double throw, maybe 2 rows or 3 rows, depending. They're usually like 8 pins or 12 pins, and I'll carry bases for them. I may only have a couple, but like they come in handy. You need to wire something up, you need to rig something up. That's my go-to. And then I have some like general relays, some like White Rogers relays. I keep a lot of stuff like that, just in a bin. Like that way, I have it all and keep it all. So if I need something like for it, for that example, time delay relays, same thing. I generally do not use those cheap like Mars style time delays from the supply houses, the square ones that are kind of like chintzy and like not really that accurate. I'll carry like Carlos Cavazier time delay relays.
Bougie time delays. What?
Well, I won't use those cruisettes because I don't know. I've never had good luck with them. They after power outages and stuff. I use the Carlos Cavazier ones. They never burn out. Never had one fail yet.
Carlos Convazier. I'm gonna look that up now. You got me curious. Carlos. How do you spell Yeah, how do you spell that word?
Fuck. I'm trying not to curse, and you're being a dick. Uh, but yeah, I use those. I use those time delays. That way, it's a multi-function time delay, multi-voltage, multi-function. You could do delay on breaks, delay on makes. You could do one shots, pulses. You could do 120, 208 with one time delay. So it's a solid time delay.
I'm listening. I'm listening.
So that's what I generally carry. I'll carry like 5 of them because I mean, you go into a rack after a power outage. I mean, you may have 5 bad time delays between 2 racks. So I'll keep those time delays in my truck. Just so I'll have them, and I mean, they burn up on startup all the time too. So I'll keep a stock of those. Dixel controllers. I generally keep a 208 and 120-volt Dixel controller in my truck. Like
Oh,
the
for the self-contained ones, for the
Yep.
self-contained cases.
Well, and a lot of times, like if I'm putting a defrost clock in something, I'm not usually put a defrost clock back in it. I usually put one of those Dixels in, so it's got a temp control and defrost.
Be aware though, on those, they do not take CPC sensors. CPC sensors are 10K type 2. Those black sensors are actually 10K type 3. And here's the thing. because someone told, like, I had asked on freaking one of the forums because I didn't know. I was like, hey, can I just use a CPC sensor because I had one to go bad? And someone said, yeah. And then when I went to go check it, it was fine when it was warmer, but as it went down in temp, it separated from the curve of what it
You
typically would.
you can change it to CPC on the in the controller.
I didn't think you could.
Yeah, you can. I do it all the time.
I'll have to ask Carlos.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I use them all the time. So I mean, those are killer to keep on the truck for self-contains and stuff like that. There's the little universal Dixel controllers. I mean, they're cheap. They're like 120 bucks. I mean, they're almost as much as a defrost clock and temp control together. For temp controls, I mean,
Gavazi. You're like, I was like, I'm spelling like Crevassier, trying to figure this out. I just put and it's not Carlos, it's Carlo. Carlo Gavazi.
whatever. It's been a long day. I haven't looked at one in like 6 months. So
So if anyone's looking for the part number on the Carlo Gavazi time delay relays, Delta Alpha Alpha 5-1 Charlie Mike 2-4. That'll be the relay, the time delay relay that would replace your the other ones that you don't like.
yeah, so time for like temperature controls, I generally keep like a 419 digital stat in my truck, and then the standard A19 stats. I'll keep like one or two of them. Generally, don't use them a whole lot. Like I try to replace them with electronic as much as I can,
Mm-hmm.
and then the KE2 therm ones. Like if I'm changing something, it's probably getting a KE2. They're cheaper, they're better, and they have better sensors. So the little KE2, like I think it's temp and defrost, little
Mm-hmm.
tiny. It looks like an A419.
Yeah.
I generally will use those, and then I'll keep like two A19s on the truck for like stuff like service cases or like stats for shutting off fan coils. And then I generally try to keep a box of click-ons. Like I have an entire box of like random click-ons. So Heatcraft click-ons, your standard ones, your 3 wires, your Hill Phoenix ones, your Husband ones, your Zero Zone ones, ones that fail a lot, like the blue Zero Zone ones that seem to not last that long sometimes.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I generally keep like one or two of those, and then just random click-ons. Like you can go on United's website and get random limit click-ons. I'll keep those on in there. Like you could usually make something work out of that.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Sorry, no, one of the controls that I like, which you're like, I don't like that one. I like the Ranco 060 100. Basically, it's a multi cutting cutout. You can use it for anything. You can use it for termination. You can use it for a fan delay. I believe it's actually 3 wire in there, so you can multi-purpose it. I like using it for defrost option on hot gas or hanging evaporators. A lot of times they're used for the fan pan. I know you like the A19, but I like the adjustable range of this particular control because it goes all the way from -35 up to 95.
Yeah, it's not that I don't like them. Nobody around here sells them, so like trying to find a replacement's like nearly impossible.
Really?
Yeah. So okay, let's go pressure controls because this just screwed me the other day because I went to go in the van and I had two units show up with broken pressure controls, brand new out of the box. And I went to go to the van that I usually have a low pressure control in, and I can't find it or it's gone or I don't really know what's going on with it. So I look it around and I'm in downtown Chicago and the nearest supply house is like 50 minutes away.
Mm-hmm.
So low pressure controls. I always generally keep in 1/4 inch male flare low pressure control, like so I could put a super hose on it, and I will keep the same for a high pressure control and a fan cycling control.
Yeah.
Generally, with those three, you're golden. And then I carry an encapsulated version of all three usually. So I'll carry an encapsulated the Emerson PSCs, the black ones with the 3 wire plug on the top is usually what I use, or PCSs.
What manufacturer you say it was?
The Emerson ones. I think they're PCSs or PSCs.
Yeah. PSC, and it's now Copeland. It's not Emerson. PSC-A1S Series Mini Control.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I'll keep one of those in there for high pressure and for low pressure for customers that like demand it and they don't want super hoses. They want an encapsulated control that's adjustable. So I'll keep those. They'll get you out of a pinch. So those I'll keep, and then a fan cycling control for single units. If you lose a headmaster and you need fan cycling control, that's key. And then high pressure control, like I said, and then for oil controls, generally I'll keep a Centronic 3M a truck, and then I have a Delta Pi for bits or
Oh,
stuff
please. Yeah.
just from doing Costco startups and having a spare one. I mean, don't replace a whole lot of them. Those OLKC ones, I have a couple. I have two of them because the optical eyes,
Okay.
those
So
seem to have more failure rates.
yeah, well, I like having the also the motor protectors, right? So I used to carry one for scroll, one for the Copeland compressors, just in case. Usually have a power failure or multiple power failures. They don't like them. Same thing with the Cure one. That's usually typically the Bitzer, right? With I don't even know the part number on that. But the one with the little two orange wires that are dangling off to the side. Also be aware, like if you do see those, a lot of times they'll have a discharge temperature sensor in the discharge and it runs back. That's supposed to be installed with the not the control voltage. So just so you're aware, because at one point I did not know that, and then I couldn't understand why I was burning up so many contactors and stuff. And yeah, it's not supposed to have line voltage. If you read the directions, it tells you exactly where to install it. I didn't know.
I never actually bought one of those though, like any of them.
Well, I had to hook them up when I did a conversion on a rack. And yeah, I did not read. Oh, sorry, I forgot about this one. Liquid injection valves, especially if you're dealing with compound compressors, or they call them DDS discharge, just DTC, discharge temperature control. The one that basically looks like a F expansion valve with a little power head that goes either inside the top of the scroll set on a Copeland compressor or on the compound compressors where it goes around the discharge line. Those are really really handy to have in case the bulb gets damaged or rubs up against something. Also with the hoses that you were saying, I know you use those fancy smancy ones, that the ones that you can actually make all your own, but I'm a fan of the armored Johnson Control jobbies for pressure control.
I do not like those. I like the other hoses.
Yeah, the bougie ones, the ones that you can make. I know.
I mean, I carry all different types of hoses. I mean, what, 12, 14, or 12, 16s, 20s, 24s, and I carry the armor cap tubes too, but only the ultra tubes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like if you're going to use them, use the ultra tubes. I generally keep those ones. And then also some 3/8 hoses too, because we just had this at this when we're doing startup on 3/8 to quarter adapters, hoses. So the oil pots are using 3/8, they're spoiling oil pots and they go to a quarter-inch header. So one side of the hose is 3/8, the other side is quarter. I've been seeing this a ton lately.
Really.
So on new racks. So I carry generally some 18s and 24s in those.
Hmm.
So I got some from United, I think, and then I'll keep some of those. And then like, what else?
Ooh.
Electrical.
Ooh. Oh, sorry. That's right. We keep bouncing around. I was gonna say ready-made flares because I always forget about telling people to get them because I'm lazy. And especially when you're in a tight spot, like if you happen to have a flare on top of an oil level control that is not liking you, like trying to redo that flare in that confined space, it's kind of a pain in the butt. So it's a lot easier just to cut it off with your imp cutter and put a ready-made flare on there. I'm a fan.
Spin flare.
Is that what they're actually referred to?
No, I use the spin flares. Like you ever seen that? You put them in a drill and it
Yeah.
flares out.
Yeah, I'm just kind of lazy. I'd rather cut it off and put that on there. I mean, like all this stuff really depends on what you're working on, right? I mean, like yeah, whenever I would start a new company, like I had to work for at least a month to try to figure out what I needed. When I first started, I needed a lot of subcooler sensors. A lot of them weren't working. If you work in some kind of convenience store where you're dealing with a lot of intelligent or beacon, making sure you're stocking those particular parts, right? And those sensors. You want to go to Oh, we didn't even talk about contactors. Shit. I stocked one or two like residential style 20, 30 amp for small two-phase stuff, whether it be an ice machine or whatever. One with a normally closed pole on the one side, just that way. There's some ice machines that need voltage, stagnant voltage. Regular contactors from anywhere from 20 amp up to 50 amp, and yeah, so I'm sorry, 60 amp and barrage. I don't keep for the most of like the smaller stuff. I'll carry like I'm sorry, like air conditioning style stuff, like 24-volt coil. I'll carry up to about 50 amp, but like only one of each. When we start talking about 30 amp 208 coil and 120 coil, I'll carry four of those because a lot of times you'll have some kind of catastrophe with a condenser, and then you got all of a sudden you got 4 or 5 contactors out.
I usually keep an entire box of 208 30 amp contactors in my truck, like a box of 10.
Yeah, but you sometimes they don't come with the right stuff, and you have to do what you have to do on startup. So you didn't carry that. Did you really carry that many when you did service?
Service, dude. Like it was, dude.
Really?
I don't know what it is about the 208 stuff, but like after like brownouts and stuff, it just like ravages them. So like there was times sh- I actually did this just happen like a month ago. I was helping out with service and they had a couple power outages. I went through 14 208 contactors at one store.
Damn.
And it happens all the time out here. I mean, Chicago has shitty power, especially when you start getting into the city and like deeper into like the edges of the city. I mean, there's brownouts all the time. So like I would burn through like 110-volt contactors, I'll keep two of each. But like 208 contactors, I generally have like three and four of each. And then 30 amps, I'll keep 10.
When I worked outside Philly, like we had self or single units, split condensing units that we had phase loss monitors on there for that very reason. Because like you'd walk up and you're like 183. I'm like, wow, that's weird, different. The temperature would be so high. And so the voltage goes so damn low in the city because the grids are old as dirt, and it's just not fun dealing with it.
Yeah. Let's switch to like fittings and stuff. So like
Okay.
generally like copper stuff. I will keep quite a bit of fittings from 3/8. Like I generally keep boxes of fittings at 3/8, all the way up to inch and five.
Hmm.
And then I'll have just about everything I need, like a couple 90s, couple T's, couple reducers. For all that, I'll keep a general stock of like fittings for just about anything I could think of on a small project. Like if I had to remove a valve or pipe around something to do that, I will generally keep 2 inch and an eighth and two and five or sorry 2 inch and 2 and an eighth and two and 5/8 slip couplings in the truck.
Oh, just in case you have a leak or something crazy where you got to cut something out and then you'll be able to slip it over instead of just fighting Jesus for it.
Yes. And then I will keep pipe in the truck. I usually keep a 10 footer from 3/8 all the way up to inch and five. And then I'll usually keep like a 5 foot stick of like 2 and an eighth and a 5 foot stick of 2 and 5.
So what I used to do is just tape everything up in that roll and then just tape up like whatever, like the inch and one that you said where you have the 10-foot stick. I used to just keep it wrapped up inside. And so everything would still be open, but I'd wrap it on either side of the inch and one.
I just push them all in the same pipe. So I just stack them like the inch and five, inch and three goes in the inch and five, the inch and an eighth goes in the inch and three. And I
Mm,
leave the cap on the one end of the inch and five, and I just tape the other end.
gotcha.
I mean, yeah, I'm usually on construction, so like there's usually pipe everywhere if we need it, but I usually keep a tiny bit in there. And then clamps. I generally have an entire pack out full of clamps, like 5 to 10 of each from 3/8 all the way up to inch and five. And then 2 and 8 stuff, I'll keep like 5 or 6 clamps, and then 2 and 5, same thing. Hydrodorb clamps are like easy to change, and like they will ruin your day and somebody else's day. So I usually keep a good stock of clamps in my truck. And then brass fittings. This is where I see guys lose out all the time. Like I have an entire pack out just full of brass fittings. Then I have a bucket full of brass fittings. I save every brass fitting I could ever find because it's those oddball reducers you need, like a 3/8 male flare to female flare, like, or flare adapters.
The swivel 90, right? So
So,
if you have
10 of them probably on my truck.
10, what the hell you need 10 for?
Because you always forget to get them.
Well, once we get through the fittings, I have something to help with that. Go ahead.
So like I generally keep a bunch of the swivels in there. I will generally put the swivels inside the float box when I buy them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll put one in there.
Mm-hmm.
That way it's I don't have to walk out back to the truck just cursing because I forgot to grab the swivel. But swivel 90s, reducing fittings, brass in there. I go to the supply house all the time, buy a bunch of brass, keep it in there. I mean, they get lost. 3/8 to quarter reducers, stuff like that. 1/8 inch pipe thread for transducers to flare adapters for whatever you got to do. Keep all that stuff on there.
Same thing with the quarter too, because like you deal with some of the manufacturers different size transducers, right? So I know for a fact if you guys deal with RDM uses the milliamp transducers, which typically they're quarter inch. They're not 1/8 inch like the regular CPC and microthermal and Danfoss. So
So salty when I see those.
you get salty when there's a lot of things. Why does that make you salty?
Because trying to find the adapters that nobody ever has, go to Home Depot and try to find an 1/8 inch male pipe thread to quarter-inch male or female pipe thread adapter.
Yeah,
Not fun.
I usually well, so one of the things I do stock on there, or did, is the like the 1/8 inch T all the way around. So if I have to, move stuff around, I'm able to do that.
And then packed angle valves. I keep a lot just for the fact that I'm always in startup,
Mhm.
and I use them to pull vacuums a lot. So like I will keep a couple 3/8 flare packed angle valves, couple quarter packed angle valves, a couple half-inch packed angle valves, and then random transducer packed angle valves. I'll keep one or two. There's
Well, what's nice about also keeping it too, like so, just in case, God forbid you have something leaking. Like, and I'm talking, I'm not just talking just a little, we can tighten it up where it's just leaking like it just doesn't have a purpose in life. But you can pump the system down, then you could just use the gasket, or I'm sorry, the packing that's actually in the packed angle valves, and just transfer it over to the other one. We might need to heat up the other one, kind of destroy it to get it stuck, because a lot of times after being in that refrigerant for a while and the oil expands a little bit, so it's kind of a pain in the ass. But if you get it out, you could just repack it with the packing that's actually in there in one of the new valves, and then just replace it on down the line.
so the packed angle valves I usually buy is the threaded ones because they're easier to burn in
Hmm.
because you could thread them into the header. The only problem is once you pull the packing gland, you usually can't get it back in because you can't pull the valve apart in the threaded ones.
Really?
Yeah. So the half-inch ones for sure. Like I have yet to be able to get one of those apart. Like we had vice grips on this damn thing the other day, and I could not get the stem out. It wouldn't come. Like,
You sound like Muttley.
well, it was at the point where like I was just trying to prove a point. It was in a vice. It was in my vice after that, and I was trying to beat it out with a slide hammer, and I couldn't get it. So it's probably pressed in. But yeah, so you just got to be real careful burning those. But I'll keep those. Transducer packed angle valves is another one. Like I end up using a lot, but that's more so of a startup thing. But keeping those type of deals, and then electrical fittings. I keep a ton of stuff. Like I don't use wire nuts at all. I use snow caps, the crimp on ones.
Mhm.
So I'll keep the 12 to 14s, the 16s, and then the 22s on the van, and then like tons of electrical fittings. I'll buy bags on Amazon because they're the cheapest. You could buy 1,000 kit bags for like $10 of like spade connectors. So I'll keep every size spade connector, and I have it all in a slim pack out. So I have all my electrical stuff in there, like my spades, my forks, my snow caps, my gel caps, all that stuff in there. So if I'm doing electrical stuff, I can just grab that and walk in the store with it, and I'll keep everything in there. My mini spades, but I usually buy all that stuff off Amazon because it's way easier to keep like a bulk stock of it.
Yeah, I had two tackle boxes, tackle box style, where you have the fittings on either side. And whenever I hand someone to them for them to get whatever fittings, I was like, that spills, you're picking it up, because in 10 years I have not spilled it. Knock on wood. But yeah, then that way I can have as many fittings. I would recommend, just in case you were in a pinch, since we are talking about electric fittings, carry some of the different variety of wire nuts. They make some bigger blue ones that are for bigger wires. So if you need to make a quick fix where you can't just pull a new piece of wire because it's a 50-foot piece, at least you have a bigger wire nut to connect some of that bigger stuff. Also keeping at least, I don't know, 20 feet of each wire. Now I know with you, Kev, you're doing a lot of stuff where you have to rewire a whole bunch of crap all at the same shot. So I'm sure you carry more than that.
I mean, I have an entire wire loom in my truck, a reel, like one of those like Home Depots, like the electricians have.
Hmm.
Those, like that's all full of 16 gauge. So I'll have what 12 spools of 16 gauge.
That's excessive. That's why your freaking truck's being a
Like
low rider down the road.
it's sitting on jobs all the time. Like it's
I know. I
because
know.
I'll use that, but like I'll keep generally 50 foot to 60 foot of number eights, and then the same thing with number sixes, and
Hmm.
then number tens. It's usually enough to rewire a compressor if like you gotta, God forbid, you have a wire burnout, and you could switch that. Usually aren't seeing below sixes. If it's below six, it ain't getting done today. So I'll generally keep that and some bigger crimps in there, and I usually keep a battery crimper bought off Amazon for like battery cables. It
Hmm.
crimps bigger crimps. Like so, if you got to do like a 6 gauge crimp, you could do a 6 gauge crimp.
Gotcha.
So I'll generally keep that. I have like a roll of 14 and a roll of like 12, but generally like most of the stuff I'm using is 16 gauges. And then I keep shielded cable. I keep a box of 22.2 and a box of 18.4.
I was gonna say, enough to do. At least you can do 24 volts or bipolar steppers or whatever. Like having that just in case you got to run like a pilot relay off of something where you can just free hang the 24 volt, basically the 18 gauge, in order to do that. You want to cover EMS stuff real quick?
Yeah.
All right, so I don't know. Like I said, it's dependent on what you're working on. Thank goodness that usually microthermal and CPC basically use the same pressure transducers and temperature sensors. As far as Danfoss using the PT 1000, you can still use. You have to have the different pressure transducers. What else we got? They do have high temperature sensors, but I probably see one on there per rack, and if a discharge temperature sensor is messed up, it's not going to actually shut down the rack.
The Emerson ones are hard, or the Copeland ones are hard to find.
Which one's the discharge temperature ones?
Yeah. So you actually get those are assigned to a different temp sensor reading. So they're actually like I think they're H temp.
86K or something like that.
Yeah, so just be aware of those. You guys see the white twisted ones, those are high temps. But generally I'll keep in I mean, I'm a little different. I have like bags and bags of CPC sensors in my truck, but like that's from doing these startups and same with Dan Foss. But I generally keep you need to keep at least probably like 5 CPC sensors, 4 or 5 Dan Foss sensors, and then I generally keep a suction and discharge or drop leak transducer for each rack. So I'll keep a Novar one because we did a lot of WalMarts, and then I keep a set of CPC ones,
Mhm.
they or microthermal ones, whatever you want to call them. Like they're the point 0.5 to 4.5, and I'll keep those transducers on my truck, and then I'll keep a set of Danfoss ones. I don't keep any RDM stuff because we don't have any RDM stores up here anymore.
Well, RDM can be usually PT 1000 or with a basic CPC sensor that they can be programmed for either or. But here's the problem. You can't just randomly, like if you have a controller that's doing superheat on one case, if it has a discharge temperature sensor and it's programmed for PT1000, all the sensors need to be PT1000, right? But some of the saving grace with some of this stuff is they use a lot of the same sensors. So a Sporlan 2K sensor has the same range and drop of like a Novar 2K sensor. So you don't have to like have a KE2 sensor, Novar sensor 2K, and a Sporlan sensor 2K. You can just grab one of those and it works for all three of them because the ranges are the same. You start getting into some of the Sporlan 3K stuff that's typically on the pipe. Yeah, I don't know of any other manufacturer that does that. And same thing with some of the other Novar stuff. There's a Novar sensor that's ran to the frozen food where it has like a little diode at the end. So you can't randomly just use a random temperature sensor for that. So like some of the stuff is very specific.
Yeah, I mean, just keeping that stuff on there, like couple Novar sensors, stuff like that.
Ooh, receiver gasket. Receiver gasket. Totally forgot about that. Have one of those. At least one.
Yeah, that's a big one. And then I'm trying to think what other gasket like well a three-way valve. I mean, I've only had I had one blowing the other day on Friday, but it thank God it reseated when the rack got warm. But I mean, generally, you're ended up repiping that. I mean,
I didn't. I've never ever because there's so many different like sizes of that, right? Like I've never carried a three-way rebuild kit for that.
I always cut them out and put them in because some of them, like by the time you cut and split it, like you have to split it apart. You're already three-quarters of the way there, so you might as well burn a new one in.
Yeah, and then when you try to put it back from splitting it down the middle with the Allens, it's not nice to try to put it back together because now you've just bent all these. I mean, shit, it could be a 2 1/8 line. You know what I mean? They're fairly big lines most of the time. So like trying to bend that out of the way to get that rebuild kit in there and out, it's not really fun.
Yeah, it's so I'll generally keep stuff like that. But like EMS wise, like boards, like I have a ton of boards, but I am 100% different. I'm flying by the seat of my pants. Generally, I remodels. So like we don't we go in for startup and don't know we're short on boards or stuff doesn't work or so I generally keep input boards, output boards for Danfoss, CPC, like microthermal. I have a ton of boards, but that's just because I'm doing a startups all the time. Like, I mean, generally most guys aren't going to have boards in their truck. Maybe a multi-flex board if you're doing a
Yeah.
whole lot. I mean, or a Danfoss input output board or a COM module.
168 AO plus. Sometimes power supplies. Some of the Danfoss power supplies are good to
Oh,
have on
AO
there.
plus there, guy. That's like a $1,200 board.
So listen, I'm gonna get a replacement from another company later on down the line. But if I need something in the middle of the night, I'm gonna have that on my truck. I had two 168 AO pluses because I just did not want to deal with stuff when things went down. Managing all this can sometimes be a
Oh,
pain.
back
Oh,
up. We forgot something.
oh,
Transformers.
oh yeah, all right, good.
So like Transformers guys, I will generally keep like the White Rogers, like bigger ones. Like I'll keep a 40 VA multi-tap, a 60 VA multi-tap, and then I will keep center tap transformers. Like the CPC ones, I'll keep a 60 VA generally and an 80 VA center
Mhm,
tap on there.
mhm.
That'll generally cover almost everything you need. And I carry microthermal transformers just for the fact that I do a lot of retrofits. So I will keep a 120 VA and a 50 VA.
Mhm.
So I'll carry those, and I keep a Danfoss power supply on my truck.
Yeah,
Which those power supplies Danfoss makes are really nice, and they have a lot of other applications you could use with them. Anytime you need 24 volts DC, like those are my go-to power supply.
I had a CCM board Novar. Like the rectifier for the power went bad, and
Bingo.
we
Yep.
and we got a new board, and it was a refurbished board, and so essentially it gave up the ghost. It didn't even start. Like it didn't have power going up. The kid called me and he's like, man, I can't get this thing rolling. I was like, do you have 24 volts coming out? He's like, no. I was like, I'll be right there. So we threw in the power supply and wired it up, so and it just took off. And then fuses, capacitors, and motors for like single condensing units, if that's what you're working on, making sure that you do have some of that random stuff on there.
Yeah, I mean, I generally don't carry condenser fan motors in my truck. Like I used to in my old shop. I have a horse and a half. I mean, but we were doing like a lot of Aldi work and like they still had some single units, but like
Yeah.
generally if you need a condenser fan motor, she's getting the sprinkler if it's that hot. If
Well,
it's
that's the thing. Like, I mean, this list is really dependent on what you're really working on. We're just trying to give you a little bit of idea of what you could hold on there.
so, and then to keep track of it all, so I have two ways of doing this. So if your back doors aren't fully shoved full of crap like mine are, the van, the white back of it, like you could use as a whiteboard with a marker. Just take like a dry erase marker, and
Hmm.
you can write on the back door and the inside. Works pretty good. Or you get a dry erase thing. I had a truck stock app that I found. This is like a random like stock app, and I would scan things in and out, and it would give you a report at the end of every week of what you used, and then you can go right back and just order it.
Gotcha.
That worked out really well when I was running service. That is completely gone and out the window. I gave up on that like a while ago because like there's so much stuff in and out of my van.
Yeah.
So, and it made it easier for inventory time because I already knew what was in the van. So they didn't have to go take my van out and strip search it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I used to do is just every time that I would use something, that tag gets ripped off and put in my pocket. And then as soon as I get in the truck, it goes into a little clip right on the sun visor. So when I go to a supply house, which was very, very rare, because I hate stopping what I'm having to do and take more time to roll out, go to the supply house, come back. Plus, a lot of times you're not getting paid to travel. Like the customer is typically not paying for you to go to the supply house in some instances, right? So having all that stuff readily available, and then when you finally do find yourself at the supply house, I need this stack of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. It usually ends up getting like trash for me, but
It worked
or,
for me. Whatever.
or I use the notes app on my phone and just write it down. Like here lately, I've been really bad about it, and it's gotten way out of control. So
Well,
like
see,
I went to go grab a solenoid coil the other day that I usually keep a ton of, and I'm
mhm.
like, oh, there's no coils in here for 110. I used them all.
See, that's my problem. So I have so severe ADHD where I go to look at my phone and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna put that in. I'm like, oh, I got a notification. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Yes. Ooh,
Piece of
ooh, ooh.
candy.
Oh yeah, like I get distracted. That's why like I actually that's why started carrying that notebook, the thoughts from a crowded brain notebook that I had, because every time I would go to look at my phone to remember to put a notification in there, I've now got distracted 4 times and then totally forgot what I was supposed to do. Like I do the same thing with contacts when people email me and they're like, "Hey, let's do a podcast." I'm like, d- crap, I forgot what I was doing," and then it just totally gets lost to the river. Man, that was a big list. I didn't think we were gonna go on for that long off of that.
Yep. All right, guys. Thanks for listening.
See you next time. Bye.